Welcome in to the College Football Power Hour. That's Adam Breneman. He is Jason Fitz, and I am Caroline Fenton, and we're coming to you right after the college football playoff rankings are released. We literally watched the show, heard Reese Davis filibuster, try and extend the show as long as they possibly could, and we hopped on straight to recording, and we are doing that every single week. We do it every Tuesday with our rankings reaction, and every Saturday night with our reaction to all of the action from the day of college football. So make sure to subscribe wherever you listen, podcast platform and YouTube. So let's get to it right now. Before we talk to Jedd Fisch, Washington head coach, took on a massive undertaking this past offseason, kind of rebuilding that Washington program. So Adam caught up with Jedd Fisch. We'll hear from that in just a minute. But first, we have to get to our initial reaction to the most recent college football playoff rankings. So not a ton of shakeup off the top. Oregon, number one. As we expected, they were the number one team last week. Ohio State sticks at 2. Texas sticks at 3. Penn State at 4. But this is where things change. Indiana loses to Ohio State this past weekend. One of my biggest questions going into these rankings was, well, how far does Indiana really fall relative to the rest of the chaos that occurred this past weekend? And also, how much does the committee value some of those 3-loss SEC teams, Alabama and Ole Miss and South Carolina? Well, Indiana fell from 5 to 10 in the rankings, but 11 in the seeding. So Notre Dame moves up to that 5 spot. Miami is at 6. They're the highest ranked ACC team in these rankings, so they would be seeded 3rd. Georgia at 7, seeded 8th. Tennessee at 8, seeded 9th. SMU at 9, seeded 10th. Indiana at 10, like I mentioned, ranked 10, seeded 11th. Boise State at 11. Clemson rounds out the top 12 with Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Nice little SEC cluster on the outside looking in at 13 through 15. That's a lot of numbers, and that's a lot of team names. So I'll throw it at you guys. Fitz, you start your initial reaction to some of these rankings.
Well, I think we were all curious to see where Indiana would go, and 10 is right on the edge. And so, this is that moment where I think a lot of people could look at it and say, I'm comfortable. Indiana's going to be in. They lost. They're going to be fine. Well, I don't know how comfortable I am still. There's a lot of football left to play, even though it's rivalry week, and that's basically most of what we're going to be looking at. Indiana's right on the edge. The 11 seed's important here, but also what's sitting below them. Clemson, who has a big game against South Carolina. Clemson right now is out of this college football playoff. They beat the 12 team, but they wouldn't make it because of the guaranteed bids. But here's the thing. If Clemson gets a big old win over South Carolina, that's 12 versus 15. They're going to launch up, right? So there's still opportunity for teams to rise. What happens to Arizona State taking on Iowa State, presumably in the Big 12 championship game? There's enough football left that I look at Indiana. They don't have any runway left, Adam. Their resume is what their resume is going to be. They're not going to get a lot of street cred from the last game they had this season. It's not going to help their strength of schedule, right? So if you're Indiana, you're sort of holding on for dear life, hoping nobody leapfrogs you. And I'm not sure I'm confident that won't happen.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways to look at it for Indiana. I also think, I was just talking to an Indiana fan today talking about the path for Indiana to move up to 8 and host the first-round playoff game. Because I think there's a path for that, too. Just as much as they can get leapfrogged, if a couple of things happen, I mean, ACC championship game loser is probably going to drop out. I think the ACC is going to be a one-bid league unless Clemson wins the game against South Carolina. And I should say, Georgia, if they lose the SEC championship game, probably drops below Indiana, and Indiana moves up to the 8th seed. From what I expect, they would be able to host the first-round playoff game, but just as easily, they could get leapfrogged if Clemson ends up winning that game against South Carolina. So I think that's the big thing, is where does Indiana play and fit at the end of this thing? And also, the huge storyline over the next week or so is going to be what happens with really the final spot in the playoff. If everyone wins the games we expect them to win, this thing should come down to Alabama or the winner of South Carolina against Clemson. And who's more deserving in that scenario? In my opinion, if South Carolina wins that game against Clemson, South Carolina should be the final playoff team and over Alabama because of their wins, because of their win by 25 points against Kentucky, their win by 26 against Oklahoma. They had a huge win against A&M. They beat Missouri, and at that point, they would have beaten Clemson. So I believe South Carolina, even with 3 losses, gets in the playoff. But where that plays out, because right now the committee has Bama 13, Ole Miss 14, South Carolina 15. But if South Carolina wins that game, that is a very impressive win against the number 12 ranked Clemson team.
Which is wild because Alabama beat South Carolina head-to-head. Ole Miss beat South Carolina. Not just beat South Carolina, but whooped South Carolina in Columbia. So I look at these 3-loss SEC teams, and I know that after Saturday, after all the chaos that was, Alabama had no business losing to Oklahoma. We called it on this show, potential upset, Florida over Ole Miss, and that's ultimately what happened. That I think that so many people said, now the SEC, like, no Alabama, no Ole Miss, no South Carolina. Well, the committee is showing you that there's very much so a path for one of those 3 teams to get into the college football playoff. But if you were to ask me, just looking at the resumes of those 3 teams, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, I would say the quote unquote most deserving team of all of those would be Alabama. Look at the losses. Look at the losses. Ole Miss has 3 bad losses against an unranked LSU team, an unranked Florida team that just got bowl eligible, and an unranked Kentucky team that I think just got its 6th win. I don't even think they're going to a bowl game. Yes, Alabama has 2 bad losses against Oklahoma and against Vanderbilt, but I think you can live with a loss on the road at Tennessee. I understand that South Carolina had 2 very close losses early in the season against LSU. If Lenora Sellers doesn't go down, South Carolina probably wins that game. But that didn't happen. I understand that South Carolina went on the road to Alabama, and it was such a close game. It just came down to a bad mistake by Lenora Sellers at the end of that game. That South Carolina could have beaten Alabama. But they didn't. Those things didn't happen. So I understand that if South Carolina gets that win over Clemson, that's a massive win. That looks a lot better now based off of the new rankings. But if you're comparing those 3 teams, I don't know how fair it is. And I know that we're not talking about fairness necessarily as far as the college football playoff is concerned. Nothing is fair in college football. But if I'm Alabama and I'm Ole Miss, I'm livid. I'm pissed. We beat that team.
I don't even really think it's that close between Alabama and South Carolina's resume if South Carolina beats Clemson. I don't even think the head-to-head.
What are the wins that South Carolina has that are so much more favorable than Alabama?
I'll tell you in a second. The head-to-head only matters to the committee, as they've said, and in my opinion, if we view the teams as being relatively equal. And their resumes are not equal. Alabama's losses are to Vanderbilt, to Oklahoma by 21 points, 3 touchdowns, and to Tennessee, where South Carolina's losses are to
Alabama!
3 points to LSU, 2 points to Alabama in a game you just said South Carolina could have won, and to Ole Miss.
But they didn't win.
South Carolina's wins, 25 points to Kentucky, almost 30 to Oklahoma, 24 to A&M, they beat Vanderbilt by 21 points, the team Alabama lost to. Missouri, and then Clemson, the number 12 team ranked in the country. If South Carolina beats Clemson, I would be shocked if South Carolina is not the team. It doesn't get in over Alabama. What do you think, Fitz?
I'm looking at some of these, because I'm such a nerd. All right, so strength of resume, strength of record, which is quantified by it's an algorithm that decides the average top 25 team, how would they perform.
Fitz loves an algorithm.
Yeah, Alabama's
we
won.
love an algorithm.
Alabama's won. South Carolina's 14. All right, FPI, Alabama's 4, South Carolina's 16. Strength of schedule so far, Alabama 11, South Carolina 12. Like, this is all toss-up stuff. Game control, Alabama 5, South Carolina 8. Like, this is all toss-up. So I guess to me, when you look at just the numbers and you're sort of looking at it and saying, okay, well, I got to factor in these losses versus these losses, I think head-to-head does matter in this situation. I think the 2 are close enough that head-to-head has to be a factor in it. If it was a blowout one way or the other, I don't think the head-to-head matters. But I do think in this situation, the resumes are close enough that I would go head-to-head. I think where you're both wrong, though, and look, no offense, I think we're having an SEC conversation that ain't real. Like, I don't think these teams are going to get in the college football playoff. I'm not willing to say that the ACC is a one-bid league. Like, they told you every single week, the committee has told us that SMU is right on the fringe of being top 12. Now SMU is top 12. SMU, and you're going to get an ACC championship game that's Miami versus SMU. What do we see when 2 teams in close proximity play a great game? We don't see a tremendous difference. Like, Ohio State, Penn State are both sitting in proximity of where they are because they played a really good game against each other. If Miami beats SMU in a tight game, I don't think SMU gets heavily penalized. If SMU beats Miami in a tight game, I think Miami still has I think they're still a college football playoff team. I think either of those teams are in. I don't think there's enough movement in front, barring shocking upsets. Like, okay, look, if we sit here and we see just wild, oh my God, upsets over the course of the weekend, then that changes everything. If things sort of run the way we think they will, I think the ACC gets 2 bids in this thing, and then the SEC is sort of left out. Like, even if South Carolina wins, I don't think they're going to get the movement ahead to be able to take care of bid thieves and the ACC.
And let me just say, if that does happen and Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina are left on the outside looking in or right on the bubble, I'm playing the world's tiniest violin for you. Win your games, okay? I know. I know there are so many people that are so anti-SEC, and I'm not saying that you are, Adam. Maybe you are. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, okay. Well, whatever. Like, win your games. You know, like I went to an SEC school. I live in an SEC town. I go on SEC radio. Like, I love the SEC. I'm not an SEC homer, but I'm pro SEC. And my take would be, well, win your games. I don't feel bad for you. We knew that once this field was going to open up, well, no longer is it the 5th, 6th, and 7th ranked teams in the country that feel like they're left out. Well, now 13, 14, and 15 feel like they're left out. Like, we can't. This isn't the college basketball tournament. There's not going to be 64 teams in the field. There's always going to be someone that feels like they're left out. But I think that's an interesting take about the ACC, though. And I think that you make a very fair point, Fitz, about the ACC and about how the College Football Playoff Committee views the ACC. If Miami loses to SMU in the ACC championship game, I don't see Miami completely falling out. And obviously, a lot is determined on what happens around them, what happens in some of these other conference championship games. Do we have another bid thief that potentially emerges? But I don't see Miami falling from 8 all the way to 13 or 14 with a loss in the conference championship game. Am I wrong in thinking that?
And that's where, guys, like, I think what we don't know is how they're going to quantify conference championship games. Because if Georgia loses the conference championship game and that's how they pick up their third loss, man, are we really going to keep a Georgia team out that's played the toughest strength of schedule all year long that now suddenly has to play in an SEC championship game that other teams, like, it's an extra game? To me, the only fair way, and I know fair is where a pig gets a ribbon, I hear you, but the only right way, let me say it this way, the only right way to do conference championship games is if you win, automatic bid. But we're not going to count it as a win or a loss on your resume. It's not going to count. You're not going to get the extra tick. You're not going to get the subtraction. Your record's going to stay the same. You got to make it an exhibition. Winner gets in, fine. But you can't penalize a team that goes to the conference championship game and loses. Like, if Miami goes to the conference championship game and loses, the ACC is going to be livid. If Georgia goes to the conference championship game and loses and suddenly they're left out of the college football playoff, I'd be worried that the SEC and the Big Ten decide they're going to take their ball, they're going to go home, and they're going to do their own tournament if they're left out of this thing because of a conference championship game.
That might already be in the works, to be fair.
I think Miami, if they lose, is still in, but SMU is the one that if SMU loses that, I don't think SMU gets in the playoff. Their schedule's been brutal. I mean, so has Miami's, but Miami at 6, SMU at 8, I think what are they, 9 in the 9 of the rankings that just came out. If SMU
9,
loses that
Miami
game,
6.
If SMU loses the conference championship game, I think that I see South Carolina getting in over the second ACC team and over Alabama. We'll see.
What if Clemson beats South Carolina? Then are we getting two? Then we getting 2 in. We're getting the winner of the ACC championship game in Clemson.
I think so. Yeah, I think Clemson gets in with the winner of the ACC championship, assuming it's Miami.
I also think it depends on who's in the SEC championship game, because if Texas A&M beats Texas and then loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game, you're not getting in. A 4-loss A&M team, even with a win over Texas, I don't think deserves to get in. If Georgia loses to Texas or Texas loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think both of those teams are deserving. So I think we also need to be careful about making blanket statements about all conference championship games or even a specific conference championship game, because I think it totally depends on who's potentially in the field. I think that if it's Georgia, Texas, they're both getting in.
But to your point, A&M would enter the conference championship game a 3-loss team. And that's why I say, like, okay, you already entered a 3-loss team. Like, you're probably not making the college football playoff anyway. You win, great, you get in. You lose, you're not being penalized because you lost the conference championship game. You're being penalized because you entered the conference championship games out of this conversation. Like, that's the nuance to me.
I think what the ACC and maybe some of these other teams on the bubble should be looking at is if Texas A&M beats Texas and gets to the SEC championship game and beats Georgia, I think that A&M, Georgia, and Texas all get into the playoff.
Yeah, agree.
A&M, Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee.
And Tennessee
so
as well.
You'll have 4 teams from the SEC.
Tennessee's just sitting back looking pretty. Like they're kicking their feet up. Like you guys figure it out. Well, they have to beat Vanderbilt. Beat Vanderbilt first, and then you can kick your feet up.
But that's what makes this wild, y'all, because okay, Texas A&M could still be a bid thief. And by bid thief, I'm talking about a team that's currently not ranked in the top 12 that could end up in the college football playoff and knock out a team that's currently ranked in the top 12. So A&M, if they win, if they control their own destiny, A&M wins out, they're a bid thief. There's still a very, Arizona State, Iowa State, as of now, thanks to the Big 12 statement, we know they're playing in the conference championship game. Still really confused on how we got there. But that's what the Big 12 championship game looks like. So whoever wins that, currently not a top 12 team, they're going to take it. That's the reason why, as the rankings stand right now this week, even though Clemson is number 12, they would miss the playoffs. And then also, Boise, I know I'm sitting here wearing a UNLV hoodie. I acknowledge that. Boise State is likely going to play UNLV in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. If UNLV pulls off the upset, I mean, the entire college football world needs to be rooting for Boise State to win that game. Because if UNLV wins, now all of a sudden the highest ranked group of 5 team is either going to be UNLV or Tulane, who currently is 17. And so, it depends on how they value a win over Boise State. I think it would likely be Tulane, but then you'd have Tulane suddenly and the Big 12 champion and Texas A&M all taking bids from teams that are currently in the top 12.
And Boise State doesn't look good right now. I mean, they did not look good last Saturday. So I mean, there's a path here where Boise State loses one of these games and is not the automatic bid for the group of 5. So it's going to be crazy.
And then it would probably be Tulane, assuming that Tulane wins out and wins the AAC championship game.
The only thing I would say is that Tulane at 17 ranked right now is 5 ahead of UNLV. It's a big jump for UNLV, but UNLV in this scenario beating currently the number 11 team to the committee, that might push them strength of schedule wise up. It might push them metric up around Tulane, but I think that'd be a big jump. I think Tulane, the committee ranking Tulane 17 this week was sort of the committee's way of saying the backup plan is Tulane.
I also feel like the committee putting Clemson at 12 is like, okay, Clemson's our buffer. We don't want to put these 3-loss SEC teams in. So Clemson is going to be like our buffer between the teams that really feel like, assuming that, all goes according to chalk and everyone takes care of business, which, let's be honest, maybe we shouldn't assume that that's going to be the case. Ain't nobody been taking care of business over the past couple of weeks in college football. But Clemson feels like that team of this is our line of demarcation between the teams that we feel like have definitely earned it and the teams that have been losing some of these silly games, or the teams that haven't emerged as truly being deserving of being in the college football playoff. Before we get into our conversation with Jedd Fisch, I do want to look at if the playoff was tomorrow based off of this edition of these rankings, this would be your first round of the playoff. So Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State, 1 through 4 respectively, would get the first round byes. This is what the first round of the playoffs would be. Arizona State as the highest ranked Big 12 champion, because Arizona State is now the number 1 team in the Big 12. ASU at Ohio State. Burr. It's cold in here. Number 11, Indiana at Penn State. Number 10, SMU at Notre Dame. Gross. And then Tennessee at Georgia for the second time this season. I don't think that it's something that the committee is thinking about. I think it's just, let's see these teams where they need to be seated. But there's just something that doesn't feel right about 2 of the 4 first-round playoff matchups being in-conference matchups, one of which we already got.
Yeah, I don't disagree. This is the first time we look at the playoff games in the first round, and I'm not like, woohoo! Usually, I'm sitting there, I'm like, God, these games would be so epic. I don't really want to see Indiana, Penn State. I think that would just be an absolute throttling. I do. And frankly, SMU, Notre Dame, that ain't sexy.
Wait, a throttling from who? Indiana, Penn State.
I think Penn State would throttle Indiana. I don't think Indiana can compete in that game. Penn State throttles Indiana. I think Notre Dame shuts down SMU pretty easy. Tennessee, Georgia, to Caroline's point, we've seen before. Look, that'd be a good game, but and I'm not particularly pumped for Arizona State, Ohio State. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. But compared to some of the games we've had, Adam, week in and week out leading up to this point, the first round isn't quite as sexy as it looked a week and a half ago.
Yeah. And Fitz, you think about, look at the bracket now and think about who has the best path to the championship game and who has the worst. Yeah, I think the best path would be the 5 seed, who would be Ohio State right now, assuming Oregon wins that game. You got the best path because you're going to host probably the Big 12 champion, who's the 12 seed. So probably Arizona State, like we said, Arizona State going to Ohio State. And then you get the 4 seed Boise State in a neutral site game in the second round. I mean, that's the path you want. You want to be the 5 seed. I mean, Ohio State, you'd almost prefer to lose the Big Ten championship game and play in that game as the 5 seed. And then I think the worst seed Fitz is probably being the 9 seed. Regardless of who it is, Tennessee right now, you got to go on the road, and then you got to face the Oregon-Ohio State winner, who are the 2 best teams in college football, I believe. So in that scenario, you got to go travel to Georgia, and then you play Oregon. I mean, that's not where Tennessee wants to be.
Yeah, no, not at all. You're right, and that's a bit of and for Georgia, not for nothing. I mean, they're going to have to go straight from the SEC championship game to preparing for a playoff game against Tennessee. Like, this is look, it's a first world problem to have, but I do miss a little bit the concept. I wish there was some sort of a concept baked in where we didn't get conference matchups in the first round. Easier said than done. I understand that, but wherever avoidable, I wish we could have avoided that in some of this. We'll see how it actually plays out. I don't feel as sexy about the matchups today as I did a week ago, for sure.
I mean, a week ago, didn't we have Tennessee at Notre Dame? Inject that into my veins. Hell yeah. That matchup rocks.
I think we had Notre Dame at Penn State one weekend.
Yes, give me that.
Yeah, we need more of that. We need more of that.
I'm drinking
Arizona
that
State,
from a fire
Ohio
hose.
State? Yeah, Arizona State, Ohio State ain't hammering
Arizona
it up.
State, ASU will lose that game by 40 points. Yeah. Mark my words.
Now, I think that's my biggest concern. Here's what I don't want. Because this has been such an incredible year for college football with parity everywhere. What I don't want are first round matchups like we've seen before, even in the 4-team playoff, where first round matchups are just a drubbing. And in my mind, Ohio State would kill Arizona State. Penn State would demolish Indiana. Notre Dame, SMU would not be a close competitive game. So the only game we get that's good on that first weekend of the playoffs is Tennessee at Georgia. Man, a game we've already seen this year.
With the game that we already saw, wasn't even really that great.
No.
Tennessee went up 10-0 early, but then Georgia just kind of, stopped playing with their food and realized, we're playing a game. Okay, well, we'll just go ahead and, kind of put our pedal to the metal. And I can already hear it. I can already hear the playoff expansion naysayers saying, well, this is exactly why we didn't want to expand the playoffs, because there's going to be blowouts in the playoff. You cannot tell me that you haven't enjoyed the heck out of what the last few weeks have been in the college football playoffs. I mean, college football regular season, rather. Games that really in a 4-team playoff would have meant nothing now suddenly are everything. Texas A&M, one of the best rivalries in all of college football, getting revived this weekend with a potential ticket to the SEC championship game and then the opportunity to get a first-round bye in the college football playoff. You're telling me that doesn't mean something in a game that would otherwise mean nothing?
Yeah, secondary market tickets are going, nosebleeds were going for $1,500 a pop on that game. It means something. People trying to get into that thing. Nosebleeds for $1,500.
That's insane. Where do I get in on the secondary ticket market?
Gotta be a robot.
Should have bought in on Ticketmaster a whole lot sooner, before the Eras tour and before Texas A&M. Would have been able to buy myself a nice little house. All right. Let's hear from Jedd Fisch coming up next. He took on a massive undertaking this past offseason, leaving Arizona, taking the Washington job. Adam sat down with Jedd Fisch, so we'll hear from him in just a bit.
Coach Fisch, appreciate you taking the time in game week, filming this on Tuesday. So you got a big rivalry game this weekend against Oregon. But I want to start with year one at Washington for you. You took over a roster that really was depleted when you got there. A lot of guys that left went to the NFL after the national championship appearance last year. How has year one been for you versus maybe your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a unique year. We had one returning starter. 16 of the guys that played in the playoff, in the national championship game, are in the NFL right now. 5 others, or 8 others probably had transferred out before we arrived. So it's a lot of newness, but there's been some great accomplishments in year one. Really proud of our team being undefeated at home. Proud of our team beating Michigan, UCLA, USC. And just excited for where we're headed.
I was going to ask you about the being 6-0 at home. I mean, Husky Stadium, I think one of the most underrated environments in the country. The Washington fan base has been awesome from what I've seen on social media, the way they packed that stadium. How's that fan base been in year one for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 20 in a row at home. We've won 20 games in a row, second behind Georgia in terms of, winning streak right now. Our fans have been fantastic. They've shown up. It didn't matter if it was a Friday night against UCLA or a Saturday primetime game against Michigan or against SC, and even early in the season. I mean, we've had just great crowds. Our kids have played in front of some of the amazing environments, and then on the road, our guys have experienced some amazing environments as well, stuff that you don't really see in the Pac-12.
What are your top priorities as you took this job to build a consistent winner at Washington? What were we had a great conversation, a year or two ago when you were at Arizona about the things you were doing there. So when you got here, what were the things that you're like, we got to do these 2 or 3 things right away to build a winner?
Yeah, well, the first thing we had to do is invest in the program. There was a lot of there hasn't been a consistent head coach here for, a bunch of years now. There's been 4 head coaches and 3 athletic directors in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
When you have that type of turnover, it's very hard to get the program really in a consistent place. You could have great years, but it's hard to stay consistent. So we had to invest in facilities. There's been, probably 10 to 12 years of not real investment in the facilities. So we put about $20 million in the 10 months we've been here, similar to what we did at Arizona in that regard. The second thing we did was invested in nutrition. That was a huge thing that I thought was super important. Doubled the nutrition budget in the 1 year we've been here.
Wow.
And then, need to get big and big players in here. High school recruiting. It's been a, kind of an inconsistent cycle when you have so many coaching changes, and we have players on our team that was recruited by Chris Peterson, players on our team recruited by Jimmy Lake, players on our team recruited by Kalen, and now me. We feel like we have to get this thing grounded again, and to do that, we really needed to commit to high school recruiting, and we're looking to try to sign 30 players here a week from Wednesday.
Wow. Pretty unique for you to take over a head coaching job in year one while also moving to the Big Ten in year one. You guys have some big wins, as you mentioned, on the Big Ten schedule, beat USC, beat Michigan. But what were some of the challenges of having the Big Ten schedule in year one, the cross-country travel for some of those games?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot of uniqueness of taking over a program in year one and then add to it when you're adding a new conference into it. And the difference between the Pac-12 conference and the Big Ten conference is an enormous difference, right? It's not just a small difference. So, and then when you add the travel, we're now a national conference. We've played at Penn State, at Rutgers, at Iowa, at Indiana. So those 4 road games, one was on a short week on a Friday night, one was a whiteout on a Saturday night, and 2 were 9 a.m. body time for our players. Both noon and 11 a.m. kickoffs. So we really are trying to go through this process of using year one as a learning curve. And, are we better off going 2 days in advance, or are we better off going 1 day in advance? Are we better off practicing in the morning or practicing in the evening? There's so many parts to this now that we're a national brand and a national program in this national conference that, aside from the simple things of, if you don't win in the trenches in this conference, you're not going to win. So you're not looking to outscore opponents like we did in the Pac-12 and like we did at Arizona a year ago and like we did like they've done at Washington the last couple of years. It's a defensive conference, and it's a run game conference, and it's a bad weather conference, and you have to be prepared for all of it.
Yeah. When we talked previously, we talked a lot about the big picture of college football, NIL, the challenges, the advantages you can get with NIL and the portal and everything. I wanted to ask about, with revenue sharing coming down the pipe in college football, are you optimistic about the future of college football? Do you feel like there's still some things to figure out? What's your overall mindset about the future?
Yeah, I mean, I love college football, so I'm overly optimistic. I'm as big of a fan of college football as I am a coach. I know that we're going to be entering into a new world order of how to handle the programs. I hope that there's some guardrails to allow players to continue to build their resiliency and not feel as if every time there's a hiccup, they might look somewhere else.
Yeah.
But on the same token, I'm really excited about trying to even the playing field and for us to be able to fully invest in our revenue share program like we're going to here at Washington. Hopefully the guardrails up of some programs not spending an enormous amount of money versus others would be able to continue to not allow, the discrepancies at times of personnel. But I also believe now you can see it. You can see why so many games go so many different directions is because guys that were backups don't want to be backups. They want to go start somewhere else. So college football Saturdays are amazing. Our fans, and I don't just mean Washington, I mean fans of college football have to understand that it's not just about the logo anymore. It's about the players. And you're going to see a lot of logos that have losses that they used to not have losses.
Yeah. I was looking at the turnaround you had at Arizona in year one, went 1-11 there, ended up going 10-3 by your final season there. And it was really impressive what you did in a short amount of time. Is there anything in year one here at Washington, maybe a game that you guys played or a moment in a game that makes you really optimistic about the future where you said, we got something here?
I mean, yeah, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think that we're right now, we're somewhere where we were year two at Arizona.
Yeah.
In a 3-year build, we went from, a 1-11 to 5-7 to 10-3, and won the last 7 in a row there. I feel as if, we're very close to moving that year 2 to year 3 model. Finished the season 2-1 in year 2, and then started the season and went 10-3 there. So that 16-game run of being 12-4, I really feel good about where we are in our program now. And I think that with the young guys we have, with the Damon Williams of the world and Adam Muhammad's of the world and Becker DeGraff and Kamori House and all these freshmen that we're playing, that will lead us to the type of success we want to have.
Yeah. With how college football is moving more and more over the past couple of years to a pro model, is there anything about your NFL experience that you feel like has really prepared you for this?
I do believe that there's a little bit of a differentiator when you talk about guys that have had a chance to coach in the NFL or in our situation, I've coached there for 15 years. And the amount of relationships you build during that time gives you, a lot of resources. You can make a lot of phone calls. You can rely on relationships to help you in this time of flux of like asking for some guidance and some assistance. Having Steve Belichick as our defensive coordinator, Brennan Carroll as our offensive coordinator, line coach. These are guys that I rely heavily on as we're making decisions with revenue share. And, Steve, the only thing he knows is the NFL, right?
Yeah.
So he's coached in there for 13 years, and then his dad is his dad. For Brennan, 6 years in the NFL as a coach, and then his dad is his dad, as we know. So these are a lot of great resources that we have. John Lynch's son is on our staff as a graduate assistant.
Yeah.
So to be able to pull those resources and get answers is really helpful.
You have a young quarterback on your roster. You mentioned Damon Williams, who I watched some of the tape. I mean, looked really good against UCLA, went 7 of 8 and a touchdown. I thought he looked good against Penn State at the end of that game. What have you seen from him? I mean, I think he's a guy that, and I'm sure you agree, that could be the future of the quarterback position for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% see D as our, the face of this franchise, the face of this program for the next 3 years. And I'm excited to watch us grow with him. I'm excited for him to have another off season. He didn't get here till April of last year because of, the way the rules worked. And, so we haven't even had him for a full year. He hasn't been in our weight room, our nutrition program. I recruited him when I was at Arizona and bring him with us. And I think he's going to be a sensational player. He's a very confident player. He's got all the skills you could ever ask for in terms of not just his accuracy, but also his running ability. And in this day and age of college football, if you can have a quarterback that can win in the pocket and out of the pocket, gives you a great chance.
Yeah. Coach, last question for you. You got a huge matchup against Oregon this weekend, number 1 team in the country, big rivalry game. What are your keys to victory in this one?
We got to do a lot of things right. You know, they're the number 1 team in the country for a reason. And it's not like you're the number 1 team in the country week 3 of the season. The number 1 team in the country week 12 of the season, or week 14, whatever we're in. So, you know, they haven't lost the game. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't turn the ball over. So for us, we've got to force them to be out of their comfort zone. We've got to force them to turn the ball over. We've got to get them to make some mistakes, and then we have to play as pretty close to mistake-free football as we can to beat a team that's playing at the level they're playing at right now.
Awesome. Coach, good luck this weekend. Always great talking to you, and good luck as you build Washington.
All right. Thanks for the invitation, man. Take
Thanks,
care.
Coach.
Great conversation, Adam. Just kind of your first takeaways, initial reaction after you sat down with him.
I love Coach Fisch. Isn't he just like...
He's awesome.
He's a unique character for a college football head coach. He's very intellectual. He's a deep thinker. So I was excited to ask him about revenue sharing and the changes in college football. I mean, you look at what he did at Arizona, took that program from 1-11 to, I think it was then 5-7 to then 10-3 in 3 years and turned that place around completely. He took over one of the worst rosters in the Big Ten at Washington this season. I mean, for all the great things Kalen DeBoer did, he won his conference championship, went to the title game, and then got the heck out of there because he knew the roster was terrible.
Yeah.
So he took over a depleted roster, and I think has done a pretty good job. I mean, 6-0 at home this season. They've lost some tough games, but I think the future of Washington football looks bright, and I have no doubt Coach Fisch can be the one to revive it and bring Washington back to a title game pretty soon. The thing I'm optimistic about with Washington, we talked about it in the interview, is their quarterback, Damon Williams, the young freshman who's looked really good and looked good against UCLA. I think he's the future of college football. He's a freshman right now, was committed to Arizona, then followed Coach Fisch to Washington. We'll be saying his name for a long, long time. But I always leave the Jedd Fisch conversations feeling refreshed. Like he's very unique to talk to in the game, because so many coaches give you coach speak all the time and just tell you what you want to hear, where he really thinks about questions and tells the truth and really is a deep thinker when he's doing these interviews.
So I was excited to talk to you about this interview because I talked to Coach back on National Signing Day earlier this year, and we talked a lot about the transfer portal. And it's interesting to me because he's pretty adamant that that's not the right way to build a team. That he was pretty adamant then, pretty adamant in the way that he structures his organization, that he wants guys that he's sat down with for a long time, that he's been able to look in their eyes. He's been able to talk to their family. He knows them. They know him. He's able to develop them. And what's interesting to me is that you talk so much about how college football is now a transfer game, a recruiting game, not a development game. But Coach is big on the opposite approach. Can it work in college football if you're, especially at a school like Washington that's coming off of such success? Can that fan base in your mind be patient enough to let Coach Fisch build it his way? Because I don't think he's going to be able to build it his way and maintain. Like, if he wants to coach, develop, recruit, and do everything on a slow pace, that's going to take patience. And patience is a naughty, naughty word in college football.
I do think that there will be more patience at a place like Washington, where they've had recent success. I think everyone understands the roster situation. The Washington fans do, at least. But let's also be honest. Washington fans are different than LSU fans. They just are. It's a different environment. It's a different environment, and LSU fans are way more passionate. I mean, you think about Brian Kelly. I just saw Brian Kelly, LSU head coach, talk about how he's been very anti-portal, where he's kind of recruiting through the high school ranks, not been too aggressive with the portal. I just saw in a press conference, he's like, we are attacking the portal now. We're going to be aggressive. We are going after it. And part of that is because he's got to win next season or he's going to get fired. I do think Jedd Fisch will have time. But listen, I know Coach Fisch talks about how he's a high school focused staff and their recruiting plan is high school focused. He has taken advantage of the portal, and he will continue to take advantage of the portal next season as well. I have no doubt that they will sign some big time transfers. I think it's a matter of numbers. Some programs will sign 60% transfers, 40% high school, where Coach Fisch is probably more 35% transfers, 65% high school. And I do still believe, as Coach Franklin does, who we talked to last week, that you build long-term success through high school ranks, but you got to acquire transfers to be able to win right away.
You have to have that healthy balance of both. And I don't think that every single program, every single year has the exact same balance of what they might need. You know, you're a first-year head coach coming in. Jedd Fisch probably had to take in a lot more transfers than he wanted to or felt comfortable taking. But yeah, you have to field 22 somehow. Like, you have to build a team somehow. And we talk about the transfer portal being a way to microwave success. Well, maybe the transfer portal is a way to just build the foundation. It's just a way to get started, to springboard, and then you have something to sell recruits. But I think it speaks a lot about Jedd Fisch's vision and the respect that the Washington Athletic Department has for what that vision is. Because if Jedd Fisch is selling this of, I want to develop and recruit through the high school ranks and sprinkle and supplement through the transfer portal, there might be some athletic directors or athletic departments that are looking at the success that Washington just had with a transfer portal quarterback and with a lot of transfer portal pieces at Washington, the big reason that catapulted them to the national championship. Maybe some athletic departments out there are saying, are you crazy? Are you crazy? We want to get back to the national championship. We want to get back to where we just were. But I think that speaks a lot about Jedd Fisch, the way that he was able to portray his vision and the respect that the athletic department has for him to say, that wasn't your vision, maybe right now wasn't what got us to where we were and where we want to get back to, but we think that you're the right guy to get us there.
That's a great point. I think there's two other things I took away from talking to him. One was interesting to hear him talk about the travel in the Big Ten and what the new Big Ten looks like. You think about some of their losses. I mean, they went on the road to Rutgers. That's 3 time zones. They went on the road to Iowa, on the road to Indiana, on the road to Penn State. Those are long trips, multiple time zones, lost all 4 of those games. And then they've been 6-0 at Husky Stadium. So I do think there's a big impact on 18, 19-year-old kids in the travel of the cross-country Big Ten. He also talked about how in the Big Ten now, like, they got to recruit more physical. They need linemen that can come to Washington. There aren't a ton of linemen on the West Coast. When I was at ASU, we used to have to go to Michigan to find the linemen, right? You don't have them on the West Coast. They don't have these big 17-year-olds that are 300 pounds already. So I think that's a big challenge for him too. And my favorite part, the last question I asked him was, what are your keys to the game against Oregon? And I don't know if you saw his face in that, but he was like, oh, man, they're pretty good now. You know, he's like, I don't know what our keys to the game are. We got to be really good to beat them. So I thought that his reaction to that was funny.
And Adam, as you mentioned that, I talked to somebody that was rumored to be in consideration for that Washington job when it first came open. And one of the things he stressed was that between the travel you're going to ask your team to do and between the traveling you're going to ask your recruits to do to come there and how difficult it will be for their families to come watch them play, it's a much more difficult job than people realize because they are part of the Big Ten. And I think that that's the dirty little part. Like, as much as joining the Big Ten is really good for these great matchups we're getting to see, we just have to acknowledge that for some programs, you know, we've talked about with Penn State before, it's not an easy school to get in and out of, right? Like, these are factors. And if you're a kid that's playing and you're from Texas and, you know, you're being recruited by Washington, you really got to figure out, how am I getting my family there? My family wants to be able to watch these games. Like, that matters to a lot of kids. So the undertaking, I respect the hell out of Coach leaving a situation where he could have been comfortable for a long time to take on this challenge. I hope it works out for him.
Yeah, no doubt. He's just so fun to listen to. And it is so fun because last week we sat down with James Franklin. Great interview, by the way. You can find that on YouTube and your preferred podcast platform. To hear him talk about, like, development is a dirty word in college football now, like, very open and very honest about his experiences at Penn State. And I feel like James Franklin has such a politician way of speaking, and that by no means is me saying that in a derogatory way. I think it's a great thing. I think a lot of college football coaches have a lot of overlaps with kind of, you know, politicking and politicians. Jedd Fisch just feels like such a philosophical kind of guy. I feel like I could listen to him all day long. Okay, great get, Adam. It's rivalry week. Let's get to that. It is rivalry week, the final week of the college football season, which feels so weird because I feel like week 1 was yesterday. Like, I feel like we just got started, but then again, I feel like the season has taken a couple of years off of my life. We've got a bunch of massive matchups that are all marquee matchups. Texas A&M, not only is it one of the best rivalries in all of college sports, but it also has massive implications. We just talked about South Carolina and Clemson, how that game now with the most recent rankings has massive college football playoff implications. But Adam, I want to go back to your playing days. Like when you were at Penn State.
Oh boy.
Were you guys playing Michigan State rivalry week? Like it's changed a few times, has it not?
Like what's Maryland?
What is it,
Ohio State. What do you mean? Well, that's the issue with Penn State. Coach Franklin, when he came to Penn State, all over the walls in the facility, he put unrivaled. Like that was the slogan at Penn State. And I always thought it meant like, it just means we're better than everybody else. Like we're too good to have a rival at Penn State. And what I realized is that we actually don't have a rival because we consider Ohio State our rival, but Ohio State considers Michigan their rival. Penn State won't admit that Maryland's a rival because they're like our little brother, right? So that Maryland thinks we're a rival, but we're not. But it would be, everyone at Penn State would say that Ohio State is the rival. That's the biggest game of the year. And I have some good and bad memories from the Ohio State game. My freshman year, we were playing at Ohio State. And it was me, Christian Hackenberg was the quarterback. I started at tight end that game. And our first drive of the game, my entire family travels to Ohio Stadium, to Columbus for this game. I mean, I got grandma and grandpa there. I got aunts and uncles. And they are in the first row of the end zone that we're going into on the first drive of the game. Very first row.
Oh.
And I'm like,
So
I know where they're
sweet.
at. And I'm planning this like entire thing. Like if I happen to score in this end zone, I'm going to like go over to my family. My brother is there, everyone. Well, our first drive of the game, we're driving. I have a catch on the first drive. I'm feeling good. We get in the red zone. We get to like the 8-yard line and Coach O'Brien dials up a play that goes to me in the back of the end zone. I'm like, man, this is my chance. And we've repped it all week in practice. Well, I run my little post route. Christian Hackenberg with the play action. I jump up back to the end zone for the touchdown, and the safety just jumps like right in front of me, picks it off, and takes it back like 50 yards. Ohio State beats us like 45-0 in that game.
Oh,
and we got our absolute ass kicked and got picked off right in front of my family and friends. So that was, it almost was like my favorite play in my career and ended up being a pretty bad moment and a terrible, terrible game. The Ohio State fans were ruthless, man. I was on the sideline and I just remember like the Ohio State fans being like, Breneman, you should have came to Ohio State. You're a bust. You'll never play it. And just like they're ruthless because you're right on the sideline there.
Yeah.
Like there's no space. So the rivalry week's always fun, but it depends. Ohio State's got to consider us a rival before it's considered really rivalry week for Penn State, Ohio State.
I mean,
who are the worst fans? Is it Ohio State fans?
Ohio State's the worst I've seen. Yeah, they were ruthless. I mean, some of the things they were saying to us, especially, we were getting a lot of jokes at that. And think about that time, 2013, right after the Penn State scandal. Just imagine the jokes we were getting yelled at us.
I think like it's a little weird. Like Michigan's kind of a swinger in this whole thing because like Michigan's a rival with Ohio State, but Michigan State also considers Michigan to be their big rival. Like I'll be honest, I was surprised. I looked at rivalry week. I was prepping for this. I can't wait to ask Breneman about Maryland. Like I'm just that hit me. I went to high school in Maryland, but back then they weren't in the Big Ten. They were in the ACC. So like the funny thing is, when you went to high school in Maryland, you tried to sneak into Maryland Duke games. Like that was a rivalry. There's never a spot with the Big Ten.
Maryland.
Yeah, I'm
one of the
down
big reasons that. One of the big reasons that Penn State Maryland became a kind of a rivalry is 2014. We were playing Maryland, and at the coin toss, I think it was like Stephon Diggs and the captains of Maryland. I don't know if you guys remember this. They went to the coin toss and wouldn't shake the Penn State captain's hands. You remember that? It was like it went viral.
That.
And I was talking to Mike Loxley about it, who was the Maryland OC at the time, now the Maryland head coach. And apparently he like in his pregame speech to the offense said like he was talking about Coach Franklin and was like Loxley was saying this. It was like Coach Franklin's my guy, but I ain't shaking his hand today. Like we don't shake hands with Penn State. And like the players took that like literally and go out to the coin toss and don't shake the hands, and everyone got pissed. It was hilarious.
And Coach is probably on the sidelines like, no,
He's
it's
like,
not what
I didn't mean
meant.
literally.
It's not what I meant. But thanks for listening. I'm glad that the messaging is landing, but maybe just don't take it so literally.
The players
next time.
listen at least they're listening.
Yeah. Rivalry week, which by the way are two words together that are so incredibly difficult to say when you say them fast. It's really fun when it's like an Iron Bowl situation or like an Ohio State Michigan situation, like the rivals. When you think of this week, you think of those games. Like, there are some out there that it's like, you two just have to play each other and you haven't played each other yet. So, it's like at middle school dances. It's like, you're over here, you over here. Okay, grab a girl, grab a boy. You two are going to dance together.
Who does LSU play? I mean, Oklahoma? What's up with LSU's rivalry?
Well, LSU is similar to Penn State in that LSU has a lot of rivals. It's Florida, it's Alabama, it's Ole Miss, it's Auburn. Like, LSU just kind of hates everybody and everybody just kind of hates LSU.
Y'all are twisting this. See, what you're not admitting is that both of your schools just aren't hated enough by one particular. Like, y'all are both like the side piece.
I feel like everyone kind of hates LSU.
We're the side piece.
LSU
are the side
Penn
piece.
State's the side piece. Like Ohio State's turning around. They're like, nah, like, we appreciate you, Penn State, but we got an offer here to go out with Michigan. We're going to do that, right?
Yeah, we're taking Michigan.
LSU's calling Florida, and they're like, come on, rivalry. Florida's like, have you seen Florida State? No, we're good. Like, we're good. We're going to go out Florida State over here. Like, it's just, I'm sorry. You're both side pieces. You're adorable.
And that's fine. Like, hey, like, I mean, Alabama sings it in the stadium. F Auburn and LSU and Tennessee too. It's like, pick someone who you hate the most. I think LSU just kind of hates everyone a lot. And it's like, anytime there's conference expansion, before Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC, LSU's rivalry week game was Texas A&M, and it felt so forced. But then Texas A&M and LSU kind of just like organically became a really good rivalry. And then it was like, okay, now that we have a really good thing going here, Texas A&M is going to play Texas because that's a way better rivalry than you two. So now you're just going to play Oklahoma. And it's like, oh,
hey, it's better to be the side piece. It's better to be the side piece than the sympathy piece. Like Vandy, Tennessee. Like, for Vanderbilt fans, that's a big rivalry game. Vandy, Tennessee is like James Franklin used to always try and get Nashville up for Vandy versus Tennessee. Tennessee's like, oh man, like this is our rival. Like, we got stuck with this one. Like, I mean, at least it's better to be a side piece than a sympathy piece. Tennessee is just going out with Vandy because their mom said they had to.
Well, I feel like that the Tennessee Vanderbilt rivalry is almost like I don't want to say lose-lose situation, but there's just like not a whole lot you're gaining. For example, obviously I went to LSU, so there's a whole lot of talk of LSU and Tulane, like reviving that rivalry that goes way, way, way back. And the argument against it is, well, if we beat Tulane, then that doesn't really do anything. Obviously, this year it does because Tulane's a very good football team, but over the last 15 to 20 years, like Tulane, no. And then if we lose to Tulane, well, that's terrible. That's
so
worse
true.
than it is good. So it's the same thing with Tennessee and Vanderbilt. You beat Vandy, okay, good. You did your job. You did what you were supposed to do. That's not a massive resume booster. And if you lose to Vanderbilt, there's going to be paper bags on heads.
It's the same exact thing with Pitt and Penn State. Pitt has wanted to play Penn State for a long time, and Pat Narduzzi has openly bashed James Franklin as he doesn't want to play us. And I'm like, I haven't heard, Coach Franklin hasn't said this, but I probably can guess what he's thinking. Why would we want to give up one of our non-conference games to play Pitt, which is their biggest game of the year? We get nothing if we beat them. If we lose, it ruins our whole season. And like we get paid for winning games, not for beating a rival who isn't really even a rival right now. So it's like a lose-lose situation, similar to LSU Tulane.
You scared?
Yeah, it's.
You scared?
We're scared.
Can we acknowledge
that's what Pitt wants to say.
Like, this year, can we acknowledge that the game is really just sort of a game? Like, Michigan Ohio State is not going to be a good game. Like, anytime
won by 30.
Anytime the broadcast starts with a throw out the rivalries. Throw that. Anytime they start with a throw out the records. When these two teams play, throw out the records. What they're really telling the viewers, like, sorry, this game sucks. Watch it anyway. Like, if you have to throw out the records, then the season has gone off the rails and this game really isn't worth watching. Like, Michigan Ohio State is just. Who cares? Frankly, this year, who cares?
The one game, though, on Rivalry Week that I think that is 1,000% true, throw out the records, nothing else matters, is the Iron Bowl. Like, every year in the Iron Bowl, last year, it was, the 4th and 31, 4th and 36, 4th and Milrow that it took for Alabama to beat Auburn. Other than that, like, if Jalen Milrow doesn't make one of the most miraculously clutch plays that we've seen in a long time, Alabama loses that game. And Alabama was on their way to the college football playoff. I think Auburn won maybe 6 games. They went to a bowl game, but it wasn't a very pretty season for Auburn. Like, there are so many examples of the Iron Bowl being like, what the hell just happened? Kick 6? Hello?
Sure, but and look, the fun fact on the Iron Bowl is that Alabama has literally never beaten Auburn in Tuscaloosa without Nick Saban as their coach. That is a real fact. They've never won that game in Tuscaloosa without Nick Saban as their head coach. So
that's crazy.
Okay, there's a fun fact for you. But also, at this point this year, you're right. If you're into just watching great football, it's always a wild game. It's going to be wild. I'm into games with consequence. And this year, the Iron Bowl, for the first time in forever, doesn't really have consequence. I think Alabama is squarely out of the college football playoff no matter what happens. I do not think they're going to get in, which means the Iron Bowl is for pride. And the season has gone off the rails when the Iron Bowl is for pride. I realize that Bama fans are going to lose their mind if Kalen DeBoer loses his first Iron Bowl. God, you just got to listen to Feinbaum for 2 seconds and you realize that the whole state is just going to implode if that happens at him. But I'm just saying that this year, a little different because I don't usually expect the Iron Bowl to be a pride game.
Yeah, I mean, but the game that is probably the game of the year, at least we get in rivalry week, is Texas A&M. I mean, this is probably I can take the Iron Bowl being meaningless by what we're going to get with this game, Texas A&M. First time they played since 2011. I mean, and I don't care that A&M lost to Auburn. There's really no difference in this game. A&M lost. If A&M lost this game after beating Auburn, they were out anyways with 3 losses. So this is still the Super Bowl for both these teams. A&M still has a chance to play in the conference title game. I think this is going to be an absolute classic. I'm not sure which way it's going to go, but I really think it's going to come down to Marcel Reed and the A&M offense. And if they can shorten the game offensively, Marcel Reed hasn't been turning the football over. This offense has looked entirely different with him back there. If he can take care of the football and A&M can run the ball and control the clock and keep Quinn Ewers off the field, assuming he's healthy, and then I think A&M's got a chance to really win this game, and that's when all hell's going to break loose now. A&M in the conference title game, what happens with who wins that game? If A&M then beats Georgia, I mean, it's going to be ridiculous. But I mean, A&M Texas is going to be the game of the year.
That's the game of the week, the game of the year, no doubt.
Yeah, it's this week's game of the year, right? We have one every week.
Yeah,
that's what's beautiful.
That is true. It's one of the games of the year.
But I will say this. I'm interested to see how Sark fixes whatever's up with Quinn deep. Quinn throwing the football deep is not working right now. Yours has been wildly inaccurate with guys that he's had open. He's missing deep shots that are there for him. Got to hit those, man. At some point, and this is what's been really weird about Quinn. Early in the season, it felt like he was doing a beautiful job. We talked a lot about it. Climbing the pocket, remaining accurate, tight window throws, even while he was being mobile. Ever since he was hurt, he's been different. And I don't think we're getting a full injury report on him. I don't think we're getting a full idea of what's wrong with him because he doesn't look like the same thrower. And now even when he's protected, he's missing on throws that he usually makes. He's got to be accurate. He's got to fix some of his problems in order for them to win this game.
And Fitz, to that point, the biggest thing Sark has to do in this game is I'm looking at the first 10 plays, first 15 plays of this game. Quinn Ewers has to get off to a hot start and get comfortable in the game, which means they got to run the football early. But I mean, Sark has to come up with his best shot play early to get Quinn Ewers comfortable throwing the ball down the field. And that's whether it's a screen and go, whether it's a play action shot, something that is, when they call it, Quinn Ewers feels good about it, the whole offense loves it. That's where play callers really, in my opinion, make their money. When they can kind of predict the first 10, 15 plays of the game, that's where you get your quarterback playing hot. And now Quinn has played pretty well, hasn't turned the ball over in the last 3 games at quarterback. So he's played well, but he has not been as explosive offensively as they were early in the season, to your point.
And that's the biggest question surrounding this game is how healthy is Quinn Ewers? I understand that all reports have said that he's going to play, that it was just a minor ankle sprain. Well, good to play can mean a whole lot of different things. And it was very obvious last week against Kentucky when his ankle started to act up. Because in the first half, the Texas offense was humming at 24 points, 280 total yards. They scored on 4 of their 6 possessions. That was just a very surgical performance from Texas. Quinn Ewers gets a little bit banged up, comes back out in second half. Well, in the third quarter, they turned the ball over twice, including a scoop and score, and had 60 total yards. That was very much so, you could tell, there was a line of demarcation. There was a very obvious moment where this is when Quinn Ewers was closer to 100%, and this was post-banged up Quinn Ewers. That's a Texas A&M defensive front that has made their money by disrupting the quarterback. And that doesn't really pop off the stat sheet. I think Texas A&M might be like 13th or 14th in the SEC in total sacks this season. Like, it's not the sexiest stat line for Texas A&M sacks-wise. But if you watch Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, Nick Scorton, Scooby Williams, any of that front seven, they make the lives of opposing quarterbacks really difficult. They can get quarterbacks spooked. So if that Texas offensive line that has looked good at times, has looked not very good at times, can't keep Quinn Ewers protected, and they get after Quinn Ewers, it could be a long day, because we saw what Georgia's defensive front did to Quinn Ewers in that Texas offense. They turned the ball over a bunch of times. Georgia got short field advantages. So that's Texas A&M's path to victory, because I don't think that if you go toe-to-toe Marcel Reed and Quinn Ewers, Texas A&M's not winning that battle. Quinn Ewers is an experienced quarterback. He has the deep ball. He can use his legs. He has an impressive arsenal of receivers to throw to. Marcel Reed is at his best when he's running the football. What does Texas A&M look like if and when Texas takes that away from him?
Yeah, and to your point on the Georgia game, Caroline, I saw a stat today that Texas dropped back to pass 58 times in the Georgia game, allowed pressure on 26 of those attempts. I mean, that is way, almost 50% of pass attempts they allowed pressure. And you think about this A&M defensive line with Shamar Stewart, Nick Scorton. Yes, they've given up a lot of points, but they can get pressure on quarterbacks. So that matchup, the edge of Texas's offensive line, because they've been pretty good in the middle. It's been the edge. It's been the tackles. Can Texas's tackles hold up against NFL caliber defensive ends and gives Quinn Ewers time to throw the football down the field?
Oversimplification, guys, but this game to me is all about which offense can get in rhythm and stay in rhythm. Like when you're throwing 50-something times and you're getting popped that many times, you just never have rhythm. And how much have we seen this year? The offenses that just struggle one week after the next are the offenses that never really get sort of a sense. I think that's why, Adam, you said it earlier. Like, it's about running the ball. It's about play action. It's about getting some sort of established rhythm to what you're doing. It's about making sure you're limiting 3 and outs. Not every drive has to end in points, but man, you've just got to find some 6, 8, 10 play drive rhythm to what you're doing to win this football game.
Yeah, and I really do believe, I mean, you mentioned Marcel Reed, Carolina, him running the football. I really do believe that if that A&M can go blow for blow with Texas. I think from a run game standpoint with their defensive line, I think they can, if they can slow this game down and just keep Quinn Ewers off the field, run the football, Marcel Reed can run the quarterback run game. They need to get this game late to the fourth quarter and just make it a ball game, and that's where anything happens. But if I do see a path where A&M, if they can avoid the explosive plays and not turn the football over, avoid giving up the explosive plays to Texas and not turn it over, they can really make this a long game that where they're controlling the pace of it and just get to the fourth quarter and try to see what happens.
If Marcel Reed can run the ball, I would say that this is a really close game. Like, comes down to the final possession, whoever scores last wins. I just don't know if Texas's defense is going to let him. Like, if I'm Texas, that's my number one game plan. I mean, this Texas defense, I don't think we talk about nearly enough. We talk a lot about Texas's offense, rightfully so, because you have an offensive genius in Sark as your head coach. You have an incredibly experienced starting quarterback. You have one of the biggest stars in the sport as your backup quarterback. And you have a run game that's been incredibly solid with Kerchavian Wisner and Jaden Blue. You have Gunnar Helm at the tight end position. You have Matthew Golden, who had a big game against Kentucky. Obviously, Isaiah Bond, who transferred in from Alabama. Like, you have all of these offensive weapons. But Texas has been winning games because of its defense. Texas's offense can put up 21, 24, 27 points a game, and they can blow other teams out because of what their defense has been doing. I have to believe they've been watching what Marcel Reed has been doing, how A&M has been winning games with Marcel Reed, and saying, we're not going to let this kid beat us with his legs. They're down their starting running back, and Livian Moss, who got hurt earlier in the season. He's out for the season. So it comes down to Amari Daniels and Marcel Reed. If I'm Texas, I'm not letting Marcel Reed beat us with his legs. Maybe that's a little bit of, like, still an open wound because Marcel Reed absolutely tore up my team's defense with his legs. But that's, game plan number one for me with as far as Texas is concerned, Fitz.
No, I totally agree. It's a little bit like the weekly game plan is to not let Jalen Milroe do it. And about half the teams are successful and about half the teams aren't. Like, can the best laid plans, like, this is strength on strength in that sense. Like, that's what they're going to try and take away. The question is, can they?
Texas A&M 6-0 and rushing for 200 yards. So that's the key right there. Can Texas A&M run the football?
Yeah, and will Kyle Field withstand what is going to happen on Saturday? Because I've been there live for a game when everybody's, swaying all in synchronization. That place is freaking nuts. That place is crazy.
Did you just start dancing there, Carolina?
A little bit. I've been doing. Well, have you seen?
You were getting animated.
I'm swag surfing a little bit. But that place is nuts. That place is absolutely insane. That's a matchup that's been building. That's all been festering for the last 13 years. You got a whole lot that you have to break out there. Okay, it is Thanksgiving week, so we have to wrap it up with just a quick Thanksgiving thought. And let me just say, I've never felt more seen than when my friend Jason Fitz texted in our group text and said, Thanksgiving food is trash. And I said, thank you, Fitz. Finally, someone in my life doesn't say, what? You're crazy. You're such a Scrooge. You've just never had good Thanksgiving. Yes, I have. And it's all mushy carbs covered in butter. That's all it is.
You guys are both absolutely crazy for that. Wait, you both don't like Thanksgiving food? Like, you don't like turkey? You don't like stuffing?
Turkey's dry. Stuffing is wet bread.
You're having bad turkey and you don't put gravy on top of it?
That's what everyone says every time.
Okay, if you have to put gravy on top of it,
you put sauce on everything. What do you mean?
Look, great pizza doesn't need toppings other than cheese. Like, I don't need any other toppings on great pizza.
Pizza has sauce on it.
Yeah, okay, but my point on turkey is that it's not, are you eating, like, this is like somebody that says, I love sushi, and then you watch them douse it in wasabi, and you're like, no, you don't. You love soy sauce wasabi. Like,
fried.
You like deep fried soy sauce wasabi. You don't like sushi, all right? Like, if you got to bathe your turkey in gravy, your turkey sucked. Like, and by the way, I've literally been to a Michelin star restaurant to have Thanksgiving dinner, and it still sucked, all right? I think Gordon Ramsay knows how to cook a turkey, and it still sucked. I'm just saying, humble brag.
I will admit that I am not as big of a fan of turkey as I am other meats or other Thanksgiving dishes, but I still love Thanksgiving food. I mean, give me some turkey, some mashed potatoes, maybe some sweet potatoes, some stuffing, put some gravy on top of all of it, give me a roll on the side, and then give me some pumpkin pie for dessert.
I just felt my gag reflex start to start working when you said the word gravy. Like, ugh. Like stuffing, I don't get it. Stuffing is wet bread with celery in it. I don't understand the intrigue. Marshmallows do not belong on sweet potatoes. I love a good sweet potato. Just throw it in the oven, put some butter on it. It's gonna be delicious. Like, it's cranberry sauce. When cranberry sauce comes out of the can and it's still can shaped, I literally want to curl up in a ball and die. That is so gross. And green bean casserole. Don't get me started on green bean casserole.
That's good stuff.
No, casserole is just my way of saying I put canned things together and I baked them. All right, like there's not like if you're opening cans of soup and you're putting your green beans and bacon and soup together with the onion thingies on them and you're baking that, like that's not cooking. All right, that's like if a 5-year-old with a can opener could make it on that day, then you didn't cook something. You created something that's weird. I'm
not a fan. Just eat regular green beans. They're delicious. But my family, we all just decided a few years ago, like we're not going to subject ourselves to this anymore. So now we just eat tamales on Thanksgiving, and it's awesome. And everybody loves tamales, and they're delicious. And I'll give thanks to that. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Enjoy Rivalry Week and enjoy your mushy bread and your your sweet potatoes with marshmallows. I hope you love it. I'm not going to yuck anybody else's yum, but gross. And that's going to do it for us today. You can follow Fitz on Twitter at Jason Fitz. You can follow Adam at Adam Breneman 81. You can follow me at Caroline Fenton 1. We'll be back on Saturday with our immediate reaction to all of the inevitable chaos that I think Week 14 and Rivalry Week is going to be. Like I said at the top, you can find us here every Saturday and every Tuesday with our immediate reaction. So subscribe to the podcast. We're on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Like it, review it, subscribe to it, all that great stuff. Tell your friends about it. Tell a Thanksgiving fan about it. Tell Gordon Ramsay about it and tell him that his turkey sucks in the process. We're out.